Did you know that retiring at 65 can actually be a huge mistake? And what I actually mean by that is you may actually want to try to retire earlier than that if possible, which kind of goes against conventional wisdom, especially since most people kind of focus on, getting their maximum Social Security benefit. They say, well, I can't retire until I'm 67. That way I can get my complete Social Security benefits. But that's actually not true. You can retire at any age you want. You just don't want to collect Social Security until 67 if you want to get that maximum benefit. But what I'm referring to here is how when people retire at 65, they end up getting blindsided. And that's because of something called healthy life expectancy. So you have all of these countries across the world that have their data sets of what somebody can expect to live to until they start seeing their health decline in a meaningful way. And Japan is number one at a little over 74 years old. Singapore's number two at about 73 and a half. Switzerland's at about 72 and a half. And France and Italy at about 72 years old. Not too bad, right? But here in the USA, it is only 66, guys. That just goes to show you how unhealthy the American lifestyle and the American diet is for the average person when you're looking at the fact that, most Americans are going to start having some sort of health problem by the time they reach 66 versus people in France and Italy at 72 and 74 in Singapore. That is a huge difference. So here's the problem. If you're planning on retiring at 65, you only have about a year to live a healthy life until you may start seeing some serious health problems. Now, obviously, that's just an average, and there's no way to know when you might start seeing things happen. Some people get very lucky and they live their whole life without having any major health problems, and that's great. But it is important to look at the statistics like this and realize that you might not get that lucky, so it makes sense to plan ahead if you're planning on retiring. And I know that a lot of people just simply will never be able to retire. That's just the raw facts right now. I even made a video about this about a month ago, talking about how most people will work until they die. That's just the sad reality because of the state of affairs, because of how high the cost of living is and how hard it is to save for retirement in 2025 and beyond. But even for the people who are retiring right now, their average retirement age continues to drop substantially, especially here in the US, and people are getting older and older before they are able to retire. If you take a look at this chart right here, this shows you the percentage of US adults who are retired by age group over time. And this only goes back to 2007, so not even that long ago. We're literally talking just since the GFC, okay? Back then, it was pretty rare even then for people to be between 40 and 44 years old being retired, only 2%, but now it's 1%, right? But look, as the list gets tiered into higher age groups, you have more and more people that are still working today in these age groups than back then, especially when you get into the 50s. People 55 to 59 years old, back in 2007, 19% were retired. And fast forward to today, it has dropped to 11%. And this is really probably the sweet spot for a lot of people when it comes to retirement, because this is probably the age where you'll likely be able to do it if you have made a diligent effort to retire early. And then you still have a lot of good years left there before you reach 65 and may start having some health problems down the road. But I mean, take a look, even into your 60s. Back in 2002 to 2007, you had 41% of folks that were able to retire between 60 and 64 years old. Today, it's only 32%. And then even getting into actual retirement age, it's still not looking good. At 65 to 69, back then it was 76% retired. Today it's only 70. And then of course, as you keep getting up there in years, the numbers start getting closer, and that's largely because after 67, everybody can take Social Security and you can get your maximum benefit, and people who waited till then will actually get the most money. And also, after you pass 80 years old, there's a good chance you probably won't be able to work anymore. So a lot of this, especially getting up into the higher age group, could be people that are retired involuntary as well. They might not be able to physically work anymore. So if you're somebody on the younger side right now, say you're somebody my age in your mid to late 30s or even in your 40s, and you're looking at this and saying, wow, I don't want that to be me. Maybe I should think about retiring earlier than 65. And obviously, if you're already in your 60s or if you're in your late 50s and you haven't done much to get to that point in terms of retiring earlier than that, then that might not be an option for you. For anybody that still has time, there are things you can do to increase your odds of this happening, essentially. The first thing, and probably the most important thing you can do, which is arguably even more important than how much money you have saved for retirement, is staying healthy, okay? Because you need to invest in your health just like you need to invest for your retirement. What good is any amount of money in the world if you don't have your health in retirement, guys? Yes, that's our friend the leaf blower joining us for today's video, and I'm okay with that. Everybody has to work, right? I would even argue to say that it is easier to keep your health in check than it is to actually save for retirement today. Because of how expensive it is to live, you know, it can take people a lot longer to save for retirement. That's what that previous chart shows us. That's why people are retiring later and later, because they simply just don't have the funds to do so. But it's a whole lot easier to take care of your health and arguably a lot cheaper than saving for retirement. So you have to, you know, make sure you're not overweight. You have to make sure you're exercising consistently. It means eating healthy. You know, some people on this channel don't like it. I saw people complaining when I was in California, like, oh, come back to Florida. When are you coming back to Florida? But you know what? A lot of people don't realize that I'm investing in my health at an early age, because going to California every summer increases my health in a few different ways. You know, the amount of hiking I do there, guys, and how good of shape I get in while I'm doing those hikes is amazing. Like, I have literally lost 10 pounds in the past year. A year ago, I was 183 pounds. Today, I'm at 172 pounds. And a lot of that is thanks to the exercise I do when I'm in California. Now I've been reducing my calorie intake for the most part to stay at that weight. When you're walking up these mountains, your body uses a tremendous amount of energy. Your heart is getting a tremendous workout doing this. And I notice a huge difference between the time when I first get there and the time when I leave, and how easy it is to go up and down those mountains. I wish I could do it all year, but I'm not going to pay those taxes. But anyways, what I do is I get in better shape than I was the year before, and then I try to retain it until the next time I go, and then get in even better shape again, right? It's not just about the weather for me, although that is a huge aspect of it as well, because let's face it, when the weather is very nice every day and pleasant, it has a tremendous effect on my mood, and the more you feel happy with life, then the more that leads to longevity. Because one thing we know for sure is stress is a major killer. And if I were to stay in Miami all year, my stress level would be through the roof, not only because of the ridiculous amount of traffic and shenanigans that go on around here with that, but then you have to fight the weather all the time while I'm trying to do these videos. I'm constantly looking at rain almost every single day. I got to deal with a sweltering amount of heat. You never know when the next hurricane's going to hit. It's just not fun anymore, you know? So I look at it as when I go there, I'm investing in my health each year that I do that. I'm outside more, I'm exercising more, I'm working my heart and my body more, and overall I'm feeling happier on a daily basis. Now, I love winter in Miami because I don't have to deal with a lot of nasty weather here. You know, it's been raining a lot here, but you know, I've been pretty lucky with the videos and the weather hasn't been crazy hot. Also, I make sure to take care of my health. Fitness is something I've been into, you know, pretty much since I was a little kid, thanks to my dad. I started lifting weights with him in the basement when I was only like, you know, 6, 7 years old, and just kept doing it because I liked it. And to give you guys an example of staying healthy into old age, my wife's grandmother, she lived to, I believe, 106 years old. And she was even on TV in Brazil about, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, something like that, when she was still alive. And she was getting close to 100 back then. And she used to still do everything around the house, like cooking, cleaning, chores, all kinds of stuff at like 98, 99 years old, you know, and they even interviewed her because it's like, how many people can still do that, you know? Not really that many. You know, it was pretty incredible. And you know what her tip was for making that happen, for being able to do all this stuff at such an old age? It was very simple. It was just keep moving. So if you want to have any shot at living a long life and a nice retirement, you need to make sure you keep yourself healthy. That's why I said this is more important than the financial aspect. You know, you can adapt to a different financial situation, but you cannot adapt to failing health, unfortunately. And unfortunately, when people go to retire, this is something that they overlook tremendously. You know, a lot of people think that retirement means that you're going to have more days on the couch in front of the TV, and this is probably the worst thing that you can do for yourself in retirement. You know, it's great to be able to retire early, but if this is what you're thinking about doing with your retirement, then it's probably better if you don't even retire. Probably be better off staying at work and keeping on your feet and staying more active. But then of course the next thing that you have to do if you want to retire earlier than 65 is you need to get your finances in order. You need to have a goal in mind of when you actually do want to retire. Say you want to try and beat it by 10 years and you want to retire by 55. And this might not be realistic for a lot of people, but the younger you are, the more realistic it could be. So how do you go about doing this? How do you go about getting ahead of the curve and being able to hit that retirement goal 10 years earlier than most people? Well, obviously, the number one thing you have to do is you need to save and invest as much as possible for retirement. And one easy way to do that is just to make sure that you spend less money than you actually make. I know, sounds like crazy, out of this world financial advice, but a lot of people don't do it, guys. In fact, you have half of these people in this country live paycheck to paycheck. I think it's actually more than half now, regardless of income. Doesn't matter if you're a six-figure earner or you're making 40K a year, you have people across all different income levels that live paycheck to paycheck because it comes down to irresponsibility. Another thing you can do is keep your living expenses to a minimum. You know, you don't buy the most expensive house. You don't live in the most expensive area. You don't have to remodel your house every 10 years. You don't keep borrowing against your home and never paying it off and continuing to owe more and more on your mortgage. You don't keep buying a new house every 7 years and never get a fully paid off home and constantly keep buying a bigger and better house when your income goes up. You save the difference. You keep that extra money for your future. That's how you get ahead. Another thing you can do, you can either take one of two approaches to this, guys. You can either only get married once or never get married at all. And I know that sounds crazy, but that can really mess up your retirement savings more than people think, because, you know, when you get divorced, it can be a major financial setback, especially, you know, the longer you're married, usually the stickier the divorce gets, the more expensive it can be, the more assets need to be divided up and all kinds of things like that. So it's really in your best interest to make sure that you either don't get married at all or you just never get divorced. And obviously, life happens. Nobody can guarantee either one of those things just because of how unpredictable life is. But we can do our best to mitigate those risks, knowing that this is the case before it's too late. Another thing that people like to do also when they get older, I'm even guilty of wanting to do this myself, is buying a second home, a vacation home, right? Because if you think you're doing well and you found a place that you regularly like to visit, you may be tempted to buy a second home. And some people can afford it and still retire with ease, and others can't. But to give yourself the maximum chance of being able to retire, then you might not want to do this. And obviously a lot of people won't even be able to do this, right? But if you are somebody who's in the position to do it, you really have to look at how it might affect your future retirement goal. And really only you can answer that question. Only you know how much money you make. Only you know how much money you're going to need saved for retirement. Only you can decide if the purchase you're going to make is going to be a smart one. Maybe that house will be worth a lot in the future. You'll be able to sell it in retirement. I don't know. And here's an interesting thing for you to consider as well, because one thing that can actually depend on your financial success the most going into and leading up to retirement is your asset allocation. meaning how much of your portfolio is invested in bonds and how much of it is invested in equities or stocks at any given moment. And if anybody remembers, not that long ago, I made a video talking about how there's a new study out that shows that the most successful investment strategy as of late is to actually be 100% invested in equities all the time and completely forget about bonds. And I'm not saying this is what you should do, and I'm definitely not your financial advisor, but just want to make sure that people take a look at that as well, because things are always changing, guys. Look how different the world and the financial system looks right now than it looked just 20 years ago. So what used to work as a strategy might no longer be the best thing to do. And especially if you still have a lot of years or even decades ahead of you before you plan to retire, this is something worth looking into. And of course, you should hire a financial advisor if you feel lost and you don't know what to do on your own. Because that's one reason people don't save for retirement, is because they just don't know what to do. And having somebody in your corner that's an expert and does know what to do and deals with this on a daily basis can really pay dividends later down the road for you. Because the reality is, being able to stick with a retirement plan and an investment strategy is probably one of the most important things that will get you to retirement as well. Because what often happens to a lot of people, especially ones that try to go it on their own, is they start investing, they see a big downturn in the stock market, and people get spooked and they pull all of their money out, and then they wait for the recovery. The problem is you don't know when the recovery is going to be, and some people end up missing out on that recovery and a lot of gains along with it. And Americans that are retiring just right now, guys, imagine, if you're somebody like me, you're still very far away from retirement. If you're retiring right now in 2025, the average person will need about $1.2 million in order to last 30 years in retirement. And we know most people don't come anywhere close to that. So what do you have to do? You have to make financial sacrifices. You have to live on less than that if you want to have any shot at retiring at all. So that's why it's really important that if you do still have 2 or 3 decades ahead of you before you potentially do need to retire, then you start looking at stuff like this now. You start looking at it and saying, what can I do now in order to give myself a chance at retiring? Only about half of all US households even have a retirement savings account. You even have about 80% of people right now who are considering retiring, putting off retirement due to financial reasons. You can't retire if you don't have the funds. That's the reality. And this even sadder reality is a lot of people who do retire, their primary source of income is Social Security. Anybody over age 65, that's pretty much your primary source of income for almost everybody in this age group, guys. So the goal would be, if you want to get to retirement and have a comfortable retirement, is Social Security should be your secondary source of income in retirement. You should have saved enough on your own to be able to provide a higher level of monthly income than your Social Security can. If you can do that, then you have definitely made a nice retirement for yourself. According to the National Academy of Social Insurance, 33% of Social Security recipients receive all or nearly all of their income from Social Security. So this is not the ideal situation to end up in later on in life if you can avoid it. And listen, I've had a few people write me after I've made different retirement videos in the past saying that they live only on Social Security and they're fine with it. And that's fine, guys. I don't care. If you're comfortable and you're happy living on your Social Security income and you can get by just fine with that, by all means, that is great. All I'm saying is that if you're still younger and you have a chance not to do that and you can be ahead of that, provide yourself a more comfortable retirement than only Social Security, especially since we don't even know if there will be Social Security by the time somebody like my age retires, then that's the better way to go. That's the safe strategy. Because right now, just relying on Social Security to retire, if you're somebody in your 30s, that's like the Hail Mary throw in the football game. You're taking a big long shot hoping that that's going to work out, but oftentimes it doesn't. Right now, as of September of 2024, the average Social Security benefit is $1,922 a month. But like one of my other viewers also pointed out to me, sometimes you don't get to keep all of that money, especially if you have income from other sources. You can actually be taxed on that and not get to keep that full $1,900 a month either. And part of the problem with Social Security is it's basically a Ponzi scheme, and this kind of defines that and shows you what I mean. Because back in 1950, there was 16 workers for every person that was collecting Social Security. In 2010, it was only 3.3 workers. Look how much it diminished over that time frame, you know, a fraction of what it used to be. And by 2035, it's projected that there's only going to be 2.4 workers for each retiree. So it's no wonder that half of Americans don't believe that there will be any Social Security for them at all by the time they go to retire. And that's probably a fair guess to make at this point, because as you can see, the numbers are not very sustainable. There's just not enough people paying into the system in order to support the level of benefits that's being passed out right now, especially since we have to go through the baby boomer generation, which is the largest generation in history. That's probably going to be the generation that bankrupts Social Security because of just how many people there are in that category. And another thing you want to try to avoid doing, especially once you get to the age where you're actually old enough to collect Social Security, is you want to avoid collecting it too early if possible. And this is especially important if you're somebody who's trying to retire early. Say you're shooting for that 55 number. Well, the earliest eligible age that you are for Social Security is 62, and you get a 30% reduction in benefits. But if you take a look at this table here, this shows you the scale of how much your benefits can increase or decrease by depending on the age you claim Social Security. You know, if you start collecting it at 62, your monthly benefit will be about $1,400, but if you wait till 67, it'll go up to $2,000. And of course, it changes anywhere in between depending on the age you collect. I saw this story that talked to this guy who's 63 and he tried claiming Social Security early, but he was actually denied because he's still working. So that's something that can happen as well. And really, there's no reason to try to collect Social Security if you're still working and still making a living like that. The whole point is you want to get that extra supplemental income when you no longer have an income. So the problem is he's still working. He's making more than the annual $23,400 guideline amount. So if you are somebody that wants to collect Social Security, you cannot have an income that you make from work that high. You can still collect other forms of income like a pension plan or a military retirement plan, even interest income from your bank. That won't count towards that $23,400 a year, but if you're working or you're self-employed, it does count. And this guy kind of screwed himself too, because he made a claim to get Social Security at 63 years old, which puts him in that box of only getting $1,500 a month rather than the $2,000 a month he could get in a few more years. The worst part is he's not even eligible to collect it because he's still working. So this was a huge mistake that this guy made and clearly didn't have the right guidance, which is again why it could be important to have a financial advisor, especially when you get older, trying to figure out how to navigate this important topic. So ideally, if you're going to be collecting Social Security in retirement, you want to be making less than that $23,400 a year in order to maximize your benefit. So the only thing that this guy can do now is he can try to withdraw his claim from Social Security and say that he changed his mind. But in order to do this, he needs to meet some requirements. He needs to make the request in writing, and he needs to repay the benefits that he received, which in this case is nothing. And he only has 12 months after his application was approved to withdraw his request to receive Social Security benefits. So yeah, you can reverse this action. It's not permanent, luckily, but it's a lot of headache, a lot of red tape, different things you're going to have to go through. So the best thing is to just make the claim at the right time rather than screw it up like this. So just remember, guys, retiring at 65 could be a huge mistake due to health concerns mainly. Some people might not have any shot at retiring at all, but if you do think you're going to retire, and if your goal is to retire, then your goal may and maybe even should be to retire well before 65 if possible, to give yourself the maximum amount of enjoyment in retirement with the most healthiest years that you're able to enjoy in retirement as well. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.